Okie doke.
Let's put it in
Yeah.
gallery mode. We can see ourselves. We can see them. There we go.
Okay, there they are. The few, the many, the camered and the uncamered. Okay, good morning everybody. 27 people online, these humans in the room. We're gonna make the bracha and let's start learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu לעסוק בדברי תורה. והערב נא אדוני אלוהינו לדברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. That's the most important part of the bracha, by the way. It says, make it sweet in our mouths, you who teach the Torah. So it's not me, not Rabbi Koresses or others. We're being taught by something much bigger than us. So we're in chapter 1. Let's bring it up quickly. We dedicate this morning's learning also to David Kurtz's father, who passed away yesterday, and funerals tomorrow at 9:30 at Riverside Chapel. And dedicated this morning also, the learning this morning to the mother of my friend Adam Kleekfeld, Rabbi Adam Kleekfeld, and the mother of Peter and Bertie, and the mother-in-law of Eleanor. And dedicate this morning's learning to Renee Good and to others who lost their lives now in Iran, fighting for freedom.
Yes.
And we'll dedicate this morning's learning also to Asher Chaim's father, who's 49 years of, it was Yortzeit this week, 49 years, and Asher Chaim gave a beautiful, beautiful Torah that really informed this morning's, my thinking about this morning and what I wanted to share. So, and anyone else you can dedicate also in the chat or just speak it. The Eilish Shemos B'nai Israel, the Torah begins this morning, the second of the 5 books of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses. Avdi, God calls Moshe my servant, calls it Torah Moshe, Zichru Torah Moshe Avdi. The Eilish Shemos B'nai Israel Haba'im Mitzrayma, Eis Yaakov, Ishu Ve'Sabo. These are the names of the children of Israel who came down to the land of Egypt. The Torah now circles back to the end of chapter, to the end of the book of Genesis to reconnect, to jump over, as it were, jump back over the life events that took place after the children of Israel come down to the land of Egypt in order to talk about the movement from family to nation. That's the move in chapter 1. We move from being a family, an ancestral house, to being an Am, a nation. You'll see this in a moment. But in order to do that, they go back to the names of the 12 tribes. And what's also significant here, just this morning, just quickly, and I say this every year, but it's important for us to remember that the book of names, not called Exodus in the Torah, it's called Names. The book of names has a lot of names, and then it has moments where it has no names. And that also matters. So just be aware of that as we move through the first 2 chapters here, okay? Those who are named, what they're named, and those who are not named. By the way, it's also a rule in general in Torah that way. Names matter very much. And also it's a rule in all, I think, rabbinic literature, in Talmud also. Like when you have a name, you think, oh, what's this name all about, right? Why this name, right? Not always significant, but often it is. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Reuven, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. These are the 2 verses that give us those names. And then the capping verse is verse 5. Ahi kol nefesh yotzei yerech Yaakov shivim nafesh. And it was all of those souls who came forth from the loins of Jacob. 70 souls except for Joseph, who was already in Egypt. Make sure we know that. That's an important little thing. He's included in the ancestral and covenantal family, even though he had become an Egyptian. Vayamas Yosef v'chol echav, and Joseph and all his brothers died. V'chol adorahu, and all the generation as well. So those 6 verses are there to kind of thread back into the story where we are, right? Again, it jumped over the end of the story, the brothers' fear of Joseph now that Jacob had died, and Jacob's promise to Joseph and all that business, just to let us know where we are. The generation has passed. And Joseph dies, and all the brothers. We're not told in the Torah, by the way, whether or not the brothers also wanted to be buried in Egypt, be buried in Israel. Only Jacob and Joseph seem to be the ones who have explicit commands that they go back to the land of the ancestral holding. And now we get busy with the business of Shemot. And the children of Israel were fruitful and they multiplied and they got strong. And the land was full of them. The language here, especially the word vayishutzu, and they swarmed, is very important because they grew, but they grew in numbers that were very, like the use of the word sheretz is an insect, right? Shratzim, or sheretz is an insect. And so the text is already signaling maybe not its own perspective, but maybe the perspective of others. Oh, like, look at this population growth. They're going to outnumber us. They're going to vote in a new block, whatever it is. There is already this information that it's telling us. Pruvu is a mitzvah. They were fruitful and multiplied. Those verbs are great, because that's like the divine commandment in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis. But it has this taint, this overlay, right? And it's also very active, right? It's a very intense verbed verse. They multiply. Like there's an energy here in these next verses. Just notice them, like the sense of terror. There's movement, backing up, going forward. So there's a lot of people are scared. Like, what's going on? It doesn't say here that it says they got strong. It's true. It says ma'od, very, very. That's a very, that's a lot. Ma'od, that's a lot, right? Ma'od. It's almost, you can hear, if the text could speak in the language of a storyteller, it'd be like, they swarmed very, very, and vatimale, and they filled, it's like very chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, right? Like animals and insects. It's like, oh my, right? And so that's the capping verse. Like that's almost like between Joseph's death and then verse 8, you have this population growth. And then the Torah says, "Vayakam melech hadash al Mitzrayim shelo yada Yosef," and a new king arose over Egypt who didn't know Joseph. Like Joseph dies, the population growth, and then there's Asher Chaim said this beautifully on Wednesday night. He said he didn't know Joseph. The traditional understanding is that it's a new administration, it's a new king, it's a new pharaoh, but is also the quality of he didn't acknowledge Joseph. Right? He downplayed, he erased the kind of erasure of Joseph, the erasure of that influence, erasure of who Joseph was to Egypt. A lied over Jewish history. Jews were in Hollywood, but they open up a museum, and they forget about the Jews. Like, there's got to be there's an erasure happening. Elo yada, and elo yada is also bad in the Bible. To not know in a certain way is always a bad thing. Lo yadat Yosef, like. Lo yada, like that's Cain and Abel language, chapter 4, right? How do I know? Like, where's your brother? I don't know. They don't know. But he tells his people, we're going to move through this quickly because I want to get to the part that I just want you to have this in your heads. I know there's a lot to talk about when we start talking about this, but I really want to get this as pretext. He says to his people, he says in verse 9, behold the Jewish people, or this people, the first time we are called an Am, a nation, is by Pharaoh. He names us as such. This nation is against our nation. He says to his nation, look at verse 9. He says to his Amo, he says to my nation, this nation. We're not told that there are two nations until this moment, right? He says, behold, he says to his nation, that nation is greater and stronger than us. By the way, quoting the verse, he knows Torah. He's quoting the verse that came a couple verses before. He used the same words, Rav, many. Let's be smart with them. Let's be crafty. Let's use our wits. Penyirbe, maybe that lest they become too numerous. And Vayaki, and if there's a war, they become a fifth column. They're going to add themselves, right? and then they'll leave the land. They'll be, they have a dual loyalty. There's a dual loyalty claim. Have you heard that one before? I mean, by the way, as a kid growing up, let's just be honest. I mean, can you ever do anything internally when everything's online? But like, as a kid growing up, the question always in our house was, between me and my twin brother, would be like, if God forbid there was a war between Israel and America, who'd you fight for? You know?
Yeah.
And that was always a question. That's a big question.
What was the answer?
Let's go on. And then, Vayasimu alav sharim misim, Laman anosa v'sivlosam, and so they placed, this is his first strategy in order to keep the population where it is. He places them, he's going to, taskmasters are set over them, and he wants to make them suffer. And so he gets them involved in labor, whatever it is. Vayivan Arei Miskenot, he built storage houses, Pitom and Ramses, you can hear Moshe's name in the end of the word Ramses. Moshe, Masa, Ramses, right? These are these two storage cities in the end of verse 11. He's going to try to suffer them into population minimization. The Chashir Ya'anu also came Yirbev, but the Torah says in verse 12, the more he made them suffer, the more Yirbev V'chein Yifros, they kept exploding. It was like, and the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites, V'yakutsu, scared of the Israelites. V'yavidu Mitzrayim be'ez b'nei Sbafarach, and verse 13 is that the Egyptians made the children of Israel suffer back-breaking, soul-crushing work, and made their lives miserable. They made their lives miserable with hard labor, with levanim and chomer, which is bricks and mortar, and all of the work of the field. And all the work that they did, they made sure that it was farech work. Paro, farech. That word is a very strange word. Talked about it Wednesday night. It doesn't really etymologically line up with many other. It's very unique. It seems to come. It's this kind of work that later on in the Bible we are commanded never to make any of our workers endure. It is soul-crushing. It is back-breaking, soul-crushing defeat. It kills your humanity. And then, verse 15, this is the second strategy, because the first one doesn't work. So now he goes to the Mialdota Ivriot, to the maidservants who are either Hebrew maidservants or the maidservants of the Hebrews, of the Ivriot. Asher Shema Achas Shifra v'Shem Hashen is Pua. The first one's name is Shifra, the second one's name is Pua. And he says to them, when you're helping these Ivriot women, right, give birth, and this is Asher Chaim's beautiful, beautiful Torah, or Isen Alav 9, and you'll see ocular, you'll see at the birth stool, in benhu, if it is a male child, hamiten also, kill it. The in bashi, but if it's a daughter, chaya, let them live. Now verse 17 says, Vatir enam yaldot et Elohim. The same word for seeing, when you see, right, your eyes will discern which child it is. You will have God's power, right? It will depend upon your recognition, your eyesight, your determination. But vatir enna hamyaldot, and the same word now is not used to it becomes a completely different valence. They have fear of God, which means they had an awareness of the majesty, or what they saw made them feel God's presence. So their seeing was tied to the majestic, the powerful, the transcendent, and it induced in them a certain quality of an internal moral sense that they couldn't do it. So the very thing that Pharaoh invokes, which is use your sight to decide as if you were God, becomes for them the very thing the verse says that their sight didn't work in that direction. It worked towards seeing the divine and the divine command to honor life. And they couldn't do the thing that Pharaoh had asked of them. Right? They object at great risk. It's a tremendous moment, right? It's like and they're named, right? Shifra and Pua. I'll say it again. I said it last night. I said it Wednesday night. We don't have enough children named Pua to honor Pua. We have a lot of Shifras, but not no Pua. Very few Puas. I can understand as a father, Vatichayena es hayeladim. They kept all the children alive. Vayikra melech Mitzrayim lamiyadot vayomer lehem madua asitem ledavar zeh. So the king says to them, "Why did you do this?" Vatichayena es hayeladim. I'm always amazed by this verse. Like, why did Pharaoh investigate this? Maybe he should just. What do you mean? He gave them an out. He gave them like a chance to explain themselves. I mean, they didn't do what he said. But this sets up this very brilliant thing because they lie perfectly. They manage to lie and tell a story that's very believable, but also lift up the Egyptian women and also put down, but also save the Israelite women. But you don't understand the way that the Egyptian and Hebrew women, they're very different. Chayos hena. They're playing off the word chaya, which means animal, but also they're alive. It's also a word that was used prior. They don't even need us. They give birth before we even get there. It's not our fault. They're already done. In other words, we didn't do anything. And God is kind to these midwives, and the nation continues to proliferate. In other words, stratagem number 2 also fails. And it was because the miyaldot, the midwives, yaru, they had awe of God. In other words, they used their eyes for awe and not their eyes for power. They were not seduced by the eyes. They weren't seduced by the eyes. They were given houses. We don't know what that means exactly. The tradition says it was that these 2 women were the mother and the sister of Miriam, and the 2 houses, and the houses here are the house of priesthood and the house of kingship. But something, the Torah tells us they were rewarded. It's a very good thing to be told in the text about conscientious objection, that if you do something that only you know, we're the only ones who are in on it. Clearly Pharaoh doesn't know. We're in on it as listeners, and we're told it's important before Moses stands before Pharaoh and has the power to speak truth to power. These 2 remarkable women do it in a very different way, but they do it from an internal sense, not from a miraculous place. They have fear of Elohim. They don't have a burning bush. They don't have none of that. It's this moment of remarkable power, maybe because they themselves, maybe it's a sisterhood, maybe it's because mothers, it could be, who knows. But the Torah wants us to know about these 2 amazing women, right? And so we do. And now Pharaoh, end of chapter 1, and Pharaoh commands his nation, saying, Kol ben, it didn't work with these 2 women and their network of midwifery, but I'll go out to the people. Now I don't have to keep it under wraps. No longer does it have to have the patina of kind of whatever, I'm going to go to my people and tell them enough. Kol ben hayolod hayorat tashlichu. If you see a male child born, throw it into the Nile. Now all of you are responsible to keep the daughters alive, obviously, to keep the population, fewer men, fewer babies. Vayelech ish mibeis Levi vayikach es bas Levi. And a man from the house of Levi goes out and takes a woman from the house of Levi. We move from heroes who are named to 2 heroes who are not named. And this is, at the moment, right after the verse tells us that having children means 50% death. For these 2 anonymous slaves, talked about that on Wednesday night too, these anonymous slaves, the slaves called anonymous, the unknown, they went and did something also quiet but powerful. And as the tradition tells us, like they had their other children were telling them to get, not to stop having children, but they have children, these 2 Levites. And she saw again with seeing. She sees that he's good, which the Torah is remarkable. Torah tells us that he's good. Like, why do we have to know that he's good? Such a miraculous. Why is that pertinent information? She saw that he was good. He's a good kid. He's born. And they hide him for 3 moons. She hides him. She could no longer hide him, and she takes she takes this reed basket and she waterproofs it, very much reminiscent of Noah. In the Noah stories, exactly the same words used for Noah. So we know that in this story, that this basket is the whole world. The same way that Noah's basket is the whole world, the future depends upon the success of this ark. In the Noah story, Moses now is the future of the world. He's in the basket. And by the way, later Kabbalistic traditions connect Noah and Moshe as a Gilgul, as a reincarnation. We're not going to go into that. And you can see how obsessed Moshe is with water. The whole Moshe story is water, 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 water. Gangadin. And so he, Vatasam basa yeled, Vatasam basuf al svasa or, and they place him in the reeds on the lip of the Nile. Vatitatzava chosa mirachov v'dei ama yaselo. And now this is again an anonymous person. We don't know her name, but we know who she is. It's the daughter of, it's his sister. And this is the first moment of sibling care and concern in quite this way. And it comes from someone we later know is Miriam, who's also very connected to water, obviously. All this happening around the water, 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 water. The Yeor, the water, the power of God. The Redeemer of the Jewish people is going to be drawn like Excalibur, out of water, not out of a rock, and later water will come from a rock. But Tered, and now another unnamed woman shows up. It's all women. But Tered bas Paro lichotz al Yeor. And the daughter of Pharaoh goes down to wash herself by the Nile, and her maidservants are Naraseh holchos al yada Yeor. And they're walking along the river, and she sees another seeing. Right? The mother saw the child was good, and now she sees something. She sees the teva, she sees this ark that's in the reeds. Vatishlach et amata vatikachea. Clearly he's like not in the water, right? He's like stuck kind of in the reeds, like he's not moving. And she goes and sends the Gesundheit, sends her slave girl to fetch it for her. Vatiftach, they open up the ark, or the basket, vatir eo, they see this child. V'hinei na'ar bochen, it is, behold, it is a crying child.
A what child?
A crying child. Bocheh, crying, weeping. A baby, it's crying. Vatachmol alav, and she has compassion for the child. The second time, we looked this up, the second time this word compassion is used. I think it's the most important. The one is in Sodom and Amorah, but this one is who it comes from. It's not God who has compassion, but the daughter of Pharaoh has compassion for this child. Vatomer miyaldei, she knows, she says out loud or to herself, this must be a Hebrew kid. We know that it's a Hebrew kid, come on. You don't have to tell us. There aren't any other kids that are being placed in baskets on the water. But she tells us that. She recognizes his otherness, his danger, the risk that it is involved here. Vatomer achoso bas paro ha'elech v'karas lach isha minekes, verse 7 rather. Now Miriam jumps into action. She's amazing. She says, should I go call for you? If she doesn't step in here, the story doesn't go anywhere. Can I call you a wet nurse from those Hebrews who will nurse this child? Verse 8, Vatomer la bas paro lechi. She says, good. Lechi vatelech is also very good, like Rebecca language, Abraham language. She says, go. And she goes. And she calls the mother of the child, meaning Yocheved later, all unnamed people. All unnamed people, all of this done without names. The mother, the daughter of Pharaoh, like no names, we don't need to know their names. They could be anybody in history. And then, remarkable verse 9, she says to him, please take this child and nurse him, and I will pay you. I'm going to pay you. So she gets work doing the natural thing, and now this is where, okay, so far so good. Now let's talk about these next couple of verses and go deep, okay? All that, you want me to stop? There are a million comments to make, but I want to get here to this Moshe moment, because I feel like this is the Moshe moment, and everything that we just did is leading to now Moshe and his ocularity, his vision, his sight, and what that means for us. But I'll open up because that was a lot. Let's just open up for a couple minutes here. It's rich. I know it's rich, but it does, it's rich. Yes, Tony.
Just a poem riffing off of your poetic amazingness. We know this is water. We know this is water. We need another Gunga Din. A Gunga Din. Pharaoh's daughter is looking for Noah, or at least a Gunga Din. Aren't we also looking?
Nice. Yeah, we need to have our Gunga Din. We need to have the water slate. We're thirsty.
You had me at Gunga Din. I love that.
Oh, Gunga Din.
What is a gun?
Yeah, nice. Can we explain what Gunga Din? Character.
It's a beautiful, though questionable, it's a beautiful poem by Rudyard Kipling about the water boy who's and his last lines are, "You're a better man than I, Gunga Din," who dies giving him the soldiers water.
Oh,
It runs water.
oh my.
Okay, Adel, and then Adel, and then we're gonna go. I really want to get. It's like I opened up, but I realized I want to go back to the text. But Adel, go ahead.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Yes, it's pertinent to have heard that Moshe was good. It refers back to Genesis, where God in the creation, so he was just created. In creation, God says things were, certain days were good. And this is the genesis of the nation story and the Redeemer. So it's very apt.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, I know the Midrash says that it connects it to light, and when Moshe was born, they say that the house filled with light. But that's because they're bothered by this. In other words, the Midrash is driven by the this fragment is kind of a commentary that is, it's part of the construction of the miraculous nature of his birth. He was born, some say he was born circumcised, he was already finished. Like that's a larger conversation about Moshe being a tzaddik from birth versus being someone who had to achieve it in some way. We're not really sure what his tzaddik university was. Like, how did he become a leader? And I think that what I think that we're seeing in the first two chapters is actually are clues to what are the pieces of his like what his training ground was. And that actually is implicitly in tension with that fragment. Like, he's born good, great, but he's also fashioned in a certain way. And so far, the women of the story are the ones who are the model for the listeners, for future Moshes, future Gunga Dins. Like, you want to be like Moshe? Live in a world where there are Shifra and Puas. You want to be like Moshe? Your father, your anonymous father and your anonymous mother are the kinds of people that break rules for the sake of life and don't sit at home waiting for permission, even in a risky world, to keep doubling down on life. You want to be like Moshe. Don't tell me that you were brought up in Pharaoh's palace and then therefore you could not be a Moshe, because look at Moshe's role model. This daughter of Pharaoh was herself. You can't get better than having someone who's in the house of the monstrous and the genocidal who's doing the right thing. And so, like, there's a lot of that. So let's get into how the text is wrestling with that too. So let's get into that, okay?
Okay, so
Now,
before we continue, Jeff or Eden, like, the sound is much better than last week, but it's still a tiny bit distorted. Could someone like just turn down the input like 5% or something, or even like move Rabbi David's mic a tiny bit far away from him?
Of all the mics?
Just Rabbi David's mic, yeah.
all right. Vayigdal Ayeled, verse 10, everybody. And I see hands. I'm going to take the hands in a minute, okay? Thank you for your patience. Vayigdal Ayeled. And the child grew up, verse 10. Vaytivi'eo libas paro. So the mother of Moshe takes the child, and once he becomes gadol, vayigdal Ayeled, he no longer is a child. He's now at the age of probably 3. He's brought to Bas Paro, to the daughter of Pharaoh, Vayhila Levein, and Vaykrashma Moshe, and she becomes a son for him. That's a great story. Like that line, Vayhila Levein. Like, what's the story there? Is it that she needed a child? She was infertile? We don't know. We have Midrashim about her.
She's a Kuan Yin.
Vaykrashma Moshe, and she calls him Moshe. Moshe's name comes from the daughter of Pharaoh. Moses is not named by a Jew. Moses is named by the Pharaonic daughter. Pharaoh's daughter gives Moshe, the most famous name in the Torah, is not given by God, it's not given by Jewish parents, it's given by Pharaoh's daughter. Min hamayim mishisiu, he's been drawn forth to the water. It's not really Moshe, but he's been drawn from the water. It's clearly an Egyptian name, Moses, Ramses, but he's connected to the water drawing. Vayhi bayamim hahem vayigdal Moshe, he will be drawn from the water and he will draw others through the waters. He will always be the one who knows how to bring life out of the dangerous waters. Vayhi bayamim hahem. And it was in those days, verse 11, this is where it gets juicy. Vayigdal Moshe, and Moshe now grows up. He's already grown up. This is the second time he grows up. The Midrash will quote that. Vayetze el echav, and he goes out to his brothers. First time the verb used in the book of Exodus for Exodus. He goes out. This is the first Exodus of Moshe. Before Moshe takes other people out in what would later become known as Yitziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, he himself has to latzet. He goes out. He doesn't go out of Egypt yet. He goes out of the house. Vayar, he sees their suffering. He sees their suffering. Vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav. And he sees an Egyptian man hitting an Ivri, a Hebrew from his brothers. Now it's interesting because in this verse, Echav, his brothers, appears twice. Are both instances his brothers Hebrew brothers? Only one of them has that qualifier. The first one doesn't. His brothers is ambiguous in the first instance. He goes out to his brothers, but then it becomes Hebrew brothers. Interesting. The Midrash is going to notice that. Vayifen ko v'cho, he looks both ways, this way and that way. Vayar, and he saw, all of this seeing, right? Ki ein ish, he sees there's no man around. That's also beautiful. What does that mean exactly? There's no one else to do what he has to do? Is it that he saw that there's nobody around so he can do it? Is it safety? Is it responsibility? Is it Vayachas HaMitzri? And he hits the Egyptian, or he strikes him, Vayitmenehu b'chol, he hides him in the sand. Vayetze b'yom hasheni, he goes out again on the second day, the second Exodus. The first day leaves the palace, the second day he goes out. V'hinei shnei anashim ivrim nitzim, now there are two Hebrews who are fighting. Vayomer l'Rasha, he says to one of them who's a Rasha, who's an evil person, Lama sakerecha, why are you hitting your brother? Vayomer, it's also amazing because in the prior verse, he had hit his brother, but his prior brother, his Egyptian brother.
Wow.
Vayomer, he says, why are you hitting him? He says, Vayomer, mi samch ish. Who made you an ish? Remember that word ish that appeared right before? He looked to see if there was any ish around. And now he says, who made you an ish? He said, there was no other ish around. I better be the ish. I'm the man. Who made you an ish sar v'shafet aleinu? Who made you to be this officer and this judge? Hara hargeni ata omer? Are you going to kill me? Ata omer, you speak? Are you going to kill me with your words? Kasher ratas hamitzri, you kill the Egyptian with your words? Vayiram Moshe, and he's afraid. Now the word to see and fear also now. Now Moshe is afraid. Vayomer achein nodada, the matter is known. The jig is up. I'm in trouble. It's been posted. Vayishma paros hadavar, and now Pharaoh heard the davar, the thing. Vayivakesh larogis Moshe, and he requested to kill Moshe. Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro, and Moshe flees from Pharaoh. Vayeshev be'eretz Midyan, vayeshev al be'er. He goes to settle in Midyan, and he settles by water, of course. Where else would Moshe settle except by settled waters that are nourishing? Okay, look at Rashi on the bottom of page 4. Vayigdal Moshe, Moshe grows up. Velo kvar katav vayigdal, didn't it already say in one verse prior to that he had grown up? Amar Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Eli, harishon lekoma v'asheni legedula, sheminal paro al beso. The Torah tells us that Moshe grew up twice in order to tell us that the first time is he grew in stature, but the second time he grew in greatness. The first growing up was that he grew up, he physically grew up, but by the time the Torah tells us the second Vayigdal, he has become someone that Pharaoh trusts implicitly and has a position in the court of power. He's a powerful person. Vayar b'sivlotam, Rashi says, he saw their suffering. Rashi says that he nasan einav v'libo lios meitzar alehem. He gave his heart to feel the suffering of his brothers. Now, in this reading, when it says he went out to his brothers, who are the brothers in the first brothers? They are the Hebrews.
Yeah.
And that's what the Sforno also, the second source says, the same thing. He gave his suffering to see into the suffering of his brothers. But the problem with that, of course, is how did he know that they were his brothers? So the Ramban, Nachmanides, says, if you look at the third source, somebody must have told him that he was a Jew. He wanted to go out and meet them. He's like, I don't look like everybody else in the palace. I seem to feel like, and somebody must have told me about my past. I must really be a hidden Jew. I grew up in this convent. I grew up here in Brussels. I grew up somewhere. And he saw, he saw that they were suffering. He couldn't bear the sight. And therefore, he was, the sight of his brothers and sisters, his people being enslaved, made him, he couldn't handle it. And that's why he hit the Egyptian. He was drawn out of a sense of affinity. But
The shadow side of affinity.
yeah, or maybe, why is it the shadow? He had maybe this person was about to be murdered. In other words, don't just think that he was about to be killed. He had to save this person. He didn't, right? I mean, presumably it was, okay. Now, look, you guys if you want to see something, not everybody agrees, by the way. If you turn the page to page 7, I'm sorry, if you look to page, oh, maybe I didn't bring it. Oh, I'm upset. I thought I brought it from the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra reads that the first instance of Echav is not his brothers who are Hebrew. Vayetze el Echav, he goes out to his brothers, he goes out to his Egyptian family. And then he sees the Egyptian and hitting the Hebrew. And something in him realizes that he's also that Hebrew. And that internal to the verse is the description between, he goes out to his brothers and sees their suffering, is that it's very strange, because how does he then work with their suffering? Their suffering that would then refer to the Egyptians. He went out to his brothers, saw their suffering. Doesn't really work. But he must be saying that the suffering, he saw their suffering is in general, and then he switched. Something switched in him. Okay. Now, I just want to read you this one. Let's look at this Midrash on page 6, and then we're going to open this up, because the seeing here is vital, because the seeing ties back to the seeing of the midwives, and the seeing of he was good, and the seeing, right, of the mother, and the seeing of the sister, and the seeing. Let's look at this Midrash, beautiful Midrash, on page 6.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. He would have known by this point that he's a Jew.
Why?
There's no way he could have avoided not knowing that. I mean, you're an adult man, and you're in the world. He must have understood this.
Maybe not fully adult.
Maybe. Yeah, okay, textually we don't know why, but clearly he gets it. He gets it, but yeah. Listen to what the rabbi said, this beautiful midrash, and then we'll open it up for the last 15, 20 minutes. Vayhi bayamim hahem, vayigdal Moshe. On page 6. It was in those days that Moshe grew up. Ben 20 shana haya Moshe be'ososha. He was 20 years old. And there are some who say he was 40. Vayigdal Moshe, he grew up. V'chi ein hakol gidelim. Why does the Torah have to tell us that he grew up? Everybody grows up. Seems like a superfluous. Ela lamalachan, it's to teach you. Haya gadel kider kol olam. Shelo gider kol olam. He wasn't growing up like everybody else. Vayetze el achav, he went out to his brother. Shtei yitziot yatsa oto tzadik. The rabbis say there are two goings out, two exodi that he engaged in, this righteous man. And God wrote them one after the other. He went out on the second day, Harei Shtayim, and he saw their suffering. Mahu vayar. Shahaya ro'eh b'sivlosam ubocheh. It doesn't say this part, but he would cry. He would see them suffering and he would cry. It would make him cry. Chavali alechem yitem mosi alechem. He say, seeing them suffering this way makes me want to die. He said, there's nothing more backbreaking than this mud business, this, he would put his own shoulder, this is not in imagine this rabbinic expansion. Moshe goes out, he starts to carry the bricks with them. This is before perhaps he did what he did. Rabbi Eliezer ben Osher, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Omer Ra'am Masoy Gadol Al Katan Masay Katan Al Gadol. He says the young are carrying what the old. It's completely they're trying to depict and flesh out and give flavor and color to this scene. Umasoy Isha Isha, a woman is carrying what a man carries what a woman should carry, and a woman is carrying what a man should carry. An older person, a young person, it's all very debilitating. He would put down his royal guard and he would go help them in their suffering. And he would act as if he was helping Pharaoh. He would feign. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says, you dropped your business to go participate in the suffering of the Israelites. And you acted with them as if they were your brothers. I'm also going to drop my business with the upward, the heavens and the earth, and I'm going to talk to you. In other words, you came off of your perch in your palace to get busy. This is such an incarnational, like you can hear Christological. I'm leaving my heavenly abode. I'm leaving my disconnected, my distanced existence as God who's transcendent, and I'm going to come down and get busy with the mud with you, because you did it. I'm going to talk to you. Now, where does this text take us? In the Midrash? This is the meaning, he says, of one chapter from now, when Moshe finally gets God to come, when God comes down, God doesn't come down where? On a mountain. God comes to a shrub, comes to a bush. He says, you left your palatial, home where you were protected by an entourage and a retinue, and you came out to the people, and you had your guards helping out with the mud and carrying schmutz and everything. Me too. And I'm going to come down to you in a burning bush. And God saw that Moshe turned to see. That's the key. That Moshe's eyes, just like his adopted mother, just like his biological mother, just like the midwives, all of those women who saw and used their ocular vision to turn from the privilege and from the distant and from the spectator, right? The gaze, the disconnected and not involved gaze, to participate. Moshe turns to see what's going on. Those are the words in verse 4 of chapter 3. He saw, and God saw that he had seen. Look at the double seeing. Vayar Adonai, God saw, Kisar wrote that Moshe turned to see. Why was Moshe turning? In order to see. He wanted to see what he didn't see. And that's Moshe's inheritance from his family. It's a mishpacha of seers. Right? And she saw that the child was good. And so God saw that Moshe shesar me'asakav their os b'sivlosam, that Moshe had turned from his business to see their suffering, and therefore God called out to Moshe from the bush. Okay. Let's open it up. Let's hear some of the hands that have been raised now for quite a while. Beth, and then Jerry, and then we'll come back into the room. Yeah. Beth. Shabbat Shalom.
I love this midrash that shows Moshe going out and getting the loads that the people were bearing reapportioned. And yet, when he goes out and looks around and kills the Egyptian overseer, he's being disproportionate. so I have a hard time thinking of him as a tzaddik. On the one hand, he's able to set things to right and rebalance things. And on the other hand, he's judge, jury, and executioner. Bertie.
Shamati, can I just say I don't understand that comment? Like, how do we know, again, why is the assumption that the Egyptian is just like the ice guard, you know, the horrific killing this week? Why is that where you go? Why not think of the Egyptian like you would think of the one who had his knee on somebody's neck and trying to kill them? In other words, why not see the Jew as George Floyd and the Egyptian as somebody who's using disproportionate force and killing this Jew? Like, why is the assumption that Moshe could have done something else?
God
Like,
weighs in the long run and doesn't let him get into the.
I just don't understand what leads us to that. What's the assumption in the text that would lead you to believe that there's disproportionate force being used here?
First of all, he's got a position, Moshe, that is. He's able to walk out among the Hebrews and somehow interfere with what's going on and get their loads reapportioned. And yet, where is his authority when the beating is going on? Can't he say to the officer, stop what you're doing? Can't he interdict that?
Well,
I guess I fundamentally don't believe in capital punishment. So, like with the guys who killed George Floyd, I don't think they should be put to death.
yeah, but Beth,
I think they should rot in jail.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's clearly a situation that is a live situation. The text sees something active and there's something happening in the scene. And imagine that this is a moment where if Moshe does not take an action, that this person will be killed. Why not imagine that simple scenario where the Egyptian taskmaster is beating this person, and if Moshe does not have time to say, hey, what's going on here? In other words, why is it so obvious? I guess I'm asking, and I don't know if there's an answer, but I think just in terms of an interpretive lens, I'm just curious about that choice of setting the scene.
Here's my pushback on that, Rabbi. He had time to look around. So he didn't just instantaneously act. He had time to look around first, and then he acted.
Right.
So,
okay, that's a good point. I like that point, and I'll counter that point is that might be true, but we also then assume that he has power. I don't know why in the text we should assume that if Moshe tells him to stop, he's going to stop. So again, I think there are a lot of layers here. I'm not discounting the difficulty with somebody whom we want to say would not use force, but at the same time, I kind of want to interrogate. Maybe like Moshe is actually acting in a way that is absolutely not only moral but necessary and showcases his willingness to take an action to save somebody. So anyway,
shove the guy aside.
Yeah.
And there's multiple options, I think.
Yes, maybe. Okay, Yofi, Jerry, and then Ronnie.
All right, you're not gonna like what I'm gonna say, but it needs to be said. First of all, in the case of Moshe, in the way that I have interpreted the Torah portion throughout my reading of it in my lifetime, I have been led to believe in my lifetime that Moshe was given that position of power by God. I believe at first he was blinded, and given that position, how can I say this? He was given that position of power by Hashem or God, for a higher purpose at first, given that position. And then when he saw that Hebrew being beaten, that Hashem lifted, the blindness from his eyes and then, took the life of that Egyptian. So that when he took the life of that Egyptian and that he saw what the Hebrew was going through, Moses was like, wait a minute, my brothers are being beaten over here. And, this is what, my Hebrew brothers have been going through. And I too am a Hebrew. He identified with that Hebrew also. And while it was wrong to and killed that Hebrew, because in the commandments we are taught not to take another life, you know, still Moshe felt he had to do it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
while
Thank
it
you.
is wrong to take another life, I guess in that moment, Moshe felt like that's something he had to do.
Yes.
Brings up the question.
Yes. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jerry.
Sorry.
Ronnie. Yeah. Thank you, Shamati. Ronnie.
Unmute. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I just want to add, thinking about what Beth said, I think from a literary point of view, it's a prefiguration of Moses as a personality having anger management issues. It tells us that eventually, out of rage and frustration with the people, he's going to strike the rock, for which he will supposedly eventually be punished. So that's all I wanted to add, that Moses has a lot of anger. It's justified, perhaps, but yeah.
Shamati. Okay. Shamati. Yes. In the room.
Hi, it's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. You know, by killing the Egyptian, Moses makes it very clear, I quit this quasi-moral position that I'm in. I'm living the life of a royal, and I'm not doing anything to save my folks. And, if I just say, screw it, I am done, don't do anything for me, don't do a damn thing for me, don't give me a psychiatrist.
One and done.
One and done, I am out of here, because I don't want to keep living this beautiful life and saying, gee, it's just so sad.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing he did.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I agree. I'm also taken by the ability to feel it. Whenever I read this verse, I hear the story of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Where the Buddha was living in a palace. His father wanted to completely keep him from having to see the messiness of the world. And Moshe leaves the palace, and that's why I think it's the first Exodus. The first Exodus is leaving the place where you are unimplicated in this. And Moshe feels immediately, as soon as he sees their suffering, first he leaves the palace, then he sees their suffering, and then he takes an action. And I think that's, again, whether the action was justified or not, I think it is, but either way, he's still willing to implicate himself. And now he is. Now he has now become a part of the story. And he then leaves Egypt. First person to get out of Egypt is Moshe.
Because he has to, he's a fugitive on the run.
He's a fugitive.
Yeah.
But he also has another, and then this ties the burning bush, because he is now back in another palace. When he gets to Midian, like the Bodhisattva, he's enlightened, he's illuminated, he's out of the land of constriction, but the burning bush will throw him back into the land of samsara, the land of pain and suffering, and he can't live, free and easy in the land of Midian, which is, of course, it is completely literarily present with this settling by the well. The well are not waters that are dangerous. The well is where he's going to meet shepherds. He's going to meet his wife, and so and the word brings us back to Jacob in the parsha called Vayeshev, where he just right before Joseph in that story, it says Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv, and Jacob wants to settle, and then nothing settling happenings. And so Moshe wants to settle. He's like, listen, I just discovered who I am. I'm confused. My father wants to kill me, but now I don't think I did anything wrong per se. I basically defended a poor slave against a murderous taskmaster, and now I just want to go and live in Midian. But he can't do that. Moshe is not allowed to hide. Right. He was hidden when he was born, but he's never allowed to hide ever again. Yep. And once he's out, he's got to stay out. Yeah, Eden. You have to come closer, I think. Oh, I don't know. How do I know?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm struck by how, in this whole parsha and also in the sort of introduction from before, how mysterious and mercurial and like water power is in the story. Like the moment of Moshe taking this action, I think at one level it could be purely heroic and him using his power and privilege in this incredibly righteous way. And at the same time, not once you hear the reaction of the Hebrews saying to him, what are you doing? Like, who do you think you are? And that those things are just existing together, right? Like they're not being reconciled for us. And I think that's incredible, and it's just saying to me how humility is so necessary, and power is like this, it's like radioactive or dynamite or something, like if you have to kind of hold it so preciously. And I think the contrast of how like the midwives deal with it, and how they're kind of like under the radar and are a little sneaky and find ways to kind of subvert power that way, and he's subverting power in this other way, and like that you just have, that it's so delicate.
It is delicate. I love that framing, because by framing it I think by framing it that way, you wind up avoiding valorizing either one of these modes, right? Like, I mean, the mode of the midwives is a mode that is intensely dependent on it's rooted in fear, and not in, it's a power that is informed by danger and risk. And Moshe has to learn to come into power that is unambiguous power, and then use it and wield it well. And as Ronnie pointed out, and I think that Beth was trying to say too, there are moments clearly where Moshe's own personal, whatever, his own character issues, clearly the text tells us he uses power sometimes in ways that are very complicated. So I think that's really at the heart of this. You're right, of this story, and so much of it is spinning around like internal terrain, like the landscape of the heart. Like what is the landscape of the heart here is very vital. Like, and we're told that it begins with being told that the midwives are motivated by a fear or whatever, awe or majesty or an awareness of the divine, and so that was what motivated their conscious objection. It wasn't their own political aims. It wasn't right. So there's a motivator, and with Moses too. By the way, I think the Torah also says that what motivates him is his deep affinity and connection to his family, and there's a piece of this too. Like there's a piece of Peter Berger's work, and like the sense of like, or other philosophers who are like, is there, or Kant's kind of universal ethics, is there a right, does Moshe have a right to feel more drawn to a moral command vis-a-vis kinship than he is towards those who are not a part of his tribe and kin? And that's also a part of this. Like part of the formation story is Moshe is a Jew, or he discovers that he's a Jew, and he has to disidentify with the Egyptians and become identified with his family. And the Torah is making a statement about that here. Later on, it becomes a bit murkier. But I think all of that, and I think Eden framed it well. We're running out of time. I'm going to go in the room to someone who hasn't spoken. Tony, I'm sorry. I know you're so much to add. Wendy, go ahead.
I wanted to say that how God was directing Moshe to become the savior, to free the people from day one, and that it was a combination of nature plus nurture. So nature was the fact that he was born potentially circumcised, and why he was said to be good, but that in and of itself was not enough to catapult him forward to his eventual role. And that 40 years in the palace and 40 years with Jethro, those 80 years were necessary to increase his resume. So it's like he had the good, but then he had the nurture. He had the nature and the nurture together to be able to reach his ultimate goal.
Exactly. It's a long-standing debate in the Hasidic world about that text, about that general, about the Midrash says that that Pharaoh was very fascinated by Moshe. He came and he brought an artist to take a picture of Moshe, to draw a picture of him, and in the picture you saw, the picture was nothing like Moshe. It had all these ugly qualities or ugly elements to it. And the Midrash is interpreted invariably by people who said that Moshe was born with beauty, but also with many other, in other words, Moshe is like us. He's born with great things, and also he needed to work on them as well. So he wasn't, difference of opinion. Some people argue that he was born perfect, but okay. Yes, Sarah.
Just one simple reflection, and that is, I'm really struck by the emphasis on sight here, given that throughout Genesis, there was an emphasis on not seeing, and how there was through intergenerational trauma, not seeing is really a recurrent motif throughout.
Yep.
And so we start here, this book, in a very different universe.
Yep.
And it almost feels like a relief that trauma has been thrown off, and that I wonder how, here where there's a discussion of Moses growing up twice, how the ability to see in a way that your ancestors couldn't see is also a type of growing up and capacity to reach a dimension of leadership that wasn't possible.
I love that because, the great Emmanuel Levinas, some argue is the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. I know many think that he was. Argued for what he called an ocular ethics, an ethics rooted in a sight that sees faces and the face of the other as the locus of ethical obligation, kind of a visual or ethics. And we often speak of, in the last 100 years, there were many philosophers who tried to contrast Athens and Jerusalem, or Greek philosophy and Jewish wisdom, by using sight and sound as the two loci. That Jews were an oral people, A-U-R-A-L, and the Greeks were a visual, ocular. And I think that's slightly, it's not clean. Here you have certainly a movement towards sight as the to see. Here means to feel, and to notice, and to be connected to, and to be affected by. Right, and I think that it was the great Aviva Zornberg that talked about an imprint, that something that an imprint on the eyes. It's like something that you see that then is imprinted, right? It leaves a form, right? To see something and then to be moved by it is to carry what you've seen with you forward, and have it then lay over your heart or the world, whatever it is, and not to turn away. And turning away, of course, in the Bible also is to turn away from something is to not care. And so seeing, touching something, and caring for it are intimately connected. And Moshe is a leader who can't unsee what he has seen, and that he becomes a model for someone who stopped in his tracks by what he's seen, and it changes his life. And that becomes almost like that's one of his great quality. Amen. That's his great quality. Amen. Paul, do you have something? I thought I saw a hand fly halfway up. Maybe not. I don't know.
I have one.
One last. Yeah. Tony, I kind of sometimes when I ask people, I want to give them a chance to decide.
No, wonderful.
Paul?
I just was going to say that it's unclear to me when it is that the divine comes to believe that Moses is the leader, that we have his life described, and it's interesting, but not dispositive.
Right, not at this point for sure.
At all. And so all of this backstory as premonition is speculative. I mean, speculative on many different levels. And
why would the Torah include it, though? That's the question. It's clear that the Torah is leading up to this revelation, and so either all of this material is just to let us know how he landed in Midian, where he had that fateful event at the burning bush, or it is information. I'm just asking.
I think it is indicative of the nature of what it means to be a prophet. The uncertainty of selection is one of the critical characteristics of being a prophet.
And no doubt.
And it isn't until presumptively, Moses turns to examine the burning bush, that the divine comes to appreciate that this is the guy.
So I want to underscore that for us here, because I think it's the difference between reading the text in the way that it appears to us and then reading the text through the lens of later generations who then make of the text something. And we often don't clearly see those strata, and you're pointing them out. So if you're looking nakedly at the text without later interpretive lenses, later interpretive stages, exactly what I think Paul is saying is there, meaning the text doesn't let us know why Abraham is chosen, not at all. Just Abraham's chosen, like Adam, with Noah, he was a tzaddik, he was a righteous guy, but it seems like Moshe is, we don't have any of that evidence. We do have the story of his birth, we do have these other stories that will teach us what he went through to get to the place where he will eventually see a burning bush. But there's no compelling reason to see that nakedly as these are his qualifications or these are the intimations of someone who would become a prophet. You're right, absolutely. And it says a lot more about later generations and their decision to see all of those hints as allusions and as cryptic, clues. It says more about their mindset. It can't just be that Moshe randomly, gets the decision. There has to be a qualification. There has to be a reason for it. And then they go back and see it. And when they see it and you start to piece it together, you start to say, oh, maybe, there's some